Welcome, deep divers. Today, we're going deep into a set of sources that, well, they paint an incredibly dramatic picture. Think Washington, D.C., a really high-stakes Senate hearing.
Yeah, the scene these sources set is intense. You've got the bright lights, the cameras everywhere, and Attorney General Pam Bondi apparently ready to drop what our sources call a bombshell.
Exactly. Information that could potentially shake things up significantly.
Right. So our focus today, what we're really unpacking is this major confrontation, AG Pam Bondi versus Senator Lindsey Graham. It's all centered on these really serious allegations of political betrayal, covert actions, all linked to the war in Ukraine.
The sources we've got are pretty varied, classified recordings, financial records, even a dossier from someone formerly with the CIA.
A real mix.
So our mission, as always, is kind of sift through all this, pull out the key pieces of information from this, frankly, very complex story the sources tell. We want to help you understand the critical details, the potential implications of what apparently went down in that hearing room.
It's your shortcut to getting up to speed on a pretty surprising turn of events, according to these documents.
And just a reminder, we're relaying the narrative presented in these sources. Our job is to convey that information impartially, not to endorse any specific viewpoint within them.
Absolutely. So, setting the scene, the sources describe the tension in that Senate chamber as palpable, cameras flashing.
Capturing everything.
Right. And Bondi's there, sharp black suit, hands on this stack of classified documents. You can sort of picture it.
And according to these accounts, she doesn't waste any time.
Yeah.
Her voice, described as clear, cuts through the room. The sources quote her saying something like, "Honorable Senators, I stand here today to expose the truth."
A dramatic opening.
Very. She goes on, Senator Lindsey Graham has acted against America's interests, accusing him of secretly supporting actions to prolong the Ukraine war, which, she says, directly contradicted President Trump's push for peace talks.
Imagine the reaction in the room. Murmurs, probably shock.
And Graham. The sources say he was just meters away. He's described gripping his chair, face-flecking.
Tense.
Very. He apparently leaps up, interrupts her. The sources quote him, "This is a witch hunt. I acted for national security, not to betray anyone."
His voice apparently trembling a bit, but still trying to project confidence, a real defensive posture immediately.
But Bondi, the sources tell us, she's unfazed, signals an insistent.
Okay.
And boom, an email appears on the big screen. An exchange, reportedly between Graham and a senior Ukrainian official talking about millions in military aid.
Wow. Okay, so concrete evidence presented early.
And she connects it, claiming this email is proof. Graham met President Zelensky 3 times last year about weapons shipments.
And this is when Trump had supposedly ordered a halt to aid.
Exactly. According to Bondi's claim in the sources, trying to force peace talks with Russia. The room reportedly just went silent.
So from communication to the money trail next.
Precisely. Bondi shifts gears to the financials. Her team, the documents claim, uncovered $2.3 million.
$2.3 million. Where from?
Funneled, apparently, through offshore accounts, originating from a defense company based in Kyiv.
Offshore accounts. That always raises red flags.
Right. And ending up, allegedly, linked directly to Graham's office. The sources really emphasize that concealment method, the offshore route, as something the FBI flagged as critical. Bondi challenges him directly. Explain this.
And Graham's response, how do you respond to that?
Immediate, forceful, according to the sources. Slams his hand on the table, eyes blazing, calls it all fabricated.
Denies everything.
Vehemently denies taking a dime from Ukraine or anyone. Then he flips it, accuses Bondi of weaponizing the DOJ, turning it into a political tool to serve President Trump, calls it an unprecedented abuse of power.
So a strong counterattack, accusation versus accusation.
Exactly. But Bondi apparently wasn't finished. She pulls out more documents.
There's more.
Oh, yeah. She reveals, according to the sources, that a former CIA employee anonymously gave her a dossier weeks earlier.
A dossier, like the Steele dossier.
The sources don't draw that comparison, just call it a dossier. And apparently it didn't just have emails, it also had recordings of calls.
Recordings? Between Graham and who?
Between Graham, allegedly, and a Ukrainian oligarch who, quote, directly benefits from the war's continuation. The sources mentioned Bondi and her FBI team spent ages verifying everything in it.
Okay, recordings are potentially huge. That changes the game.
She lets that sink in, then apparently delivers this statement saying Graham's actions, secret trips to Kyiv, pushing for specific weapons like drones and missiles, all undermined peace efforts.
So tying it all together.
Right. And betrayed both the president and the American people. The sources note a Republican senator tried to jump in here talking about party unity, asking for concrete evidence.
Trying to slow things down, maybe.
Perhaps. But Bondi, according to the report, just smiled and promised more evidence was coming. But first, she hit Graham with more questions. Why weren't these trips reported to the White House? Why hide the money through 3 layers of shell companies?
Good questions. Did Graham have answers?
He tried, reportedly. Said something like, I'm not obligated to report every trip, claiming he went to Ukraine to strengthen alliances, protect Europe from Russia.
The national security defense again.
But the sources say his voice sounded, well, desperate by this point. And then Bondi apparently promised a recording that would make him rethink his answers. The sources really paint this as a deliberate, step-by-step takedown.
Building the pressure. Wow.
Yeah, the way Bondi laid this out, according to the sources, was very methodical, brick by brick. The atmosphere in the room is described as incredibly tense.
I bet. Like waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Totally. So she holds up another email copy, this time a chain of messages.
Between Graham and who now?
Graham and a close advisor to the Ukrainian president. And the subject, the transfer of long-range missile systems.
Long-range missiles. That's serious hardware.
And the timing, the sources stress, was key. These messages were allegedly sent just hours after Trump publicly called for halting military aid.
That timing looks really bad, if true.
The screen behind her zooms in on one line, reportedly. We need to keep Zelensky in the game. America must continue to lead. And at the bottom, Graham's digital signature, clear as day, according to the documents.
Oof. How did Graham react to that?
Sources describe his face as pale. He reportedly tried to argue the messages were taken out of context, insisting he was just protecting allies from Russian aggression.
The same defense, but maybe wearing thin.
It seems like it. Bondi pressed him. Why encrypt these messages using an untraceable app?
Meaning like super secure, hard to track communication.
Exactly. Why hide it like that if it's all above board? And why wasn't the White House looped in? She then revealed the FBI had dug deeper.
Okay.
They'd found a hidden account, money from a shell company in Kiev, transferred to a fund tied to Graham's campaign.
Tied to his campaign. How much?
A total of $1.8 million, according to the sources. They credit her young prosecutor, Sarah, with actually finding that hidden account.
$1.8 million linked to his campaign. That's getting very specific and very problematic for Graham. It raises that obvious question the sources imply. Why the secrecy if it's just national security?
Right, and the source of the funds.
Mm-hmm.
The documents then show bank records, a Ukrainian defense company.
Let me guess. Linked to the oligarch mentioned earlier.
Bingo. Controlled by this oligarch, Viktor Kolomoisky. Large transfers made to an organization linked to Senator Graham.
And the timing.
The sources note these payments coincided with his push for Congress to approve a $500 million aid package for Kyiv.
That looks like, well, it looks like quid pro quo, doesn't it? If the sources are accurate.
That's certainly the implication Bondi was making. Graham denied knowing Kolomoisky or getting any money, but the sources say his voice cracked, and some Republicans nearby visibly turned away from him.
Losing support in the room.
Seems that way. Then Bondi dropped another one. The FBI, she said, found traces of Graham's involvement in a call.
Another call.
Yeah, with an American general. A general who apparently ordered drone strikes on Russia without the president's approval.
Without presidential approval, that's huge. That
Yeah.
sounds almost rogue.
The sources describe the act as near treasonous. They mention this general, Colonel John Harrion, was tracked after an insider tip. A Democrat reportedly jumped in, asking if Bondi was implying a military conspiracy.
Pushing her further.
She apparently confirmed more evidence was coming, but emphasized Graham's actions, as she put it, pushed America to the brink of conflict with Russia.
So the stakes just kept getting higher. Wow, the pressure on Graham must have been immense.
According to the sources, absolutely. Bondi then pivoted again. Satellite imagery comes up on the screen.
Of what?
An explosion on the Crimea Bridge. Bondi asserts, citing intelligence reports in the source documents, that this attack happened just weeks after Graham met with Zelensky.
Okay, a correlation in timing again.
And she claims the intel reports confirm the drones used in that attack came from a U.S. shipment
Let me guess.
that Senator Graham had pushed to approve, directly linking his advocacy to a specific attack.
That's a very direct accusation, connecting the dots in a way that implies responsibility.
Then she moved to the biolabs issue.
Ah, the biolabs. That's always controversial. What did the sources say here?
She presented an intelligence report. It stated, quote, "We have evidence that biolabs in Ukraine, funded by the U.S., operated under the oversight of partners linked to Senator Graham."
Linked to Graham. How?
The report, as presented by Bondi, suggested these labs weren't just for research, but were a massive source of profit for certain individuals. We know from other parts of our source material that an investigative journalist, Clara Weiss, had initially tipped Bondi off about these labs.
Profit motive, okay. That adds another layer.
Then Bondi asked Graham directly, "Were you aware that funds from these projects were funneled through a company in Cyprus?
Cyprus, another offshore connection.
Will you hold an indirect stake?"
An indirect stake? Did she have proof?
Graham, the sources say, shot up again, voice trembling, trying to deny it. "You're fabricating wild stories. I have no stakes in Cyprus or Ukraine."
But did the denial sound convincing?
Apparently not. The sources say the desperation in his voice just made the room more skeptical. Bondi pressed on.
What else could there be?
Transaction records, showing $4.2 million.
Another sum. Good grief.
From a Ukrainian defense company transferred to a U.S. fund where Senator Graham is listed as an indirect beneficiary.
An indirect beneficiary.
And again, the timing coincided with his push for aid packages to Kyiv.
That pattern again. Push for aid, money flows somewhere connected to him.
At this point, the sources say Graham just sat down. Couldn't maintain the confident act anymore, eyes fixed on the table. A Republican senator, previously supportive, reportedly stood up, worried about party unity.
Trying to stop the bleeding.
Yeah. But Bondi's reply, as documented, was sharp. "Senator, unity cannot be built on lies." She called the war a web of interests and accused Graham of siding with those profiting from blood and tears.
Wow. Powerful language. Setting the stage for something big.
Exactly. The sources describe this whole sequence as building towards a climax. Bondi slowly reaches into her briefcase and pulls out a small black USB drive. She declares, "What I'm about to present will dispel any doubts about Senator Lindsey Graham's conduct."
The USB drive. This must be the recording she hinted at earlier.
Seems so. She holds it up, looking right at Graham. The sources say he looked like he was shrinking in his seat. Then the speakers crackle.
Ah.
Graham's voice. Clear, unmistakable, according to the report, saying, "Victor, we need to keep Zelensky in a strong position. If Trump cuts aid, I'll ensure Congress still passes the new support package, but I need that funding as we agreed."
Oh my God, that funding as we agreed, that sounds incredibly compromising.
Gasps reportedly filled the chamber. Graham shot up again, voice breaking.
What could he even say?
"That's fabricated. I never said those words. Miss Bondi, you're trying to destroy me with dirty tricks." Pure desperation, the sources suggest.
Bondi.
Calm, collected. States the recording has been verified for authenticity by the FBI.
FBI verifies.
Yeah.
That's hard to argue with.
And she says it was obtained from an insider who risked everything to bring the truth to light. Other source notes suggest it was her prosecutor, Sarah, who managed to crack an encrypted channel to get that call recording.
So, not fabricated, according to her. Verified and sourced from an insider.
Bondi then delivers her conclusion, pulling no punches according to the sources. She says the recording proves Graham took bribes from a Ukrainian oligarch
The quid pro quo made explicit.
and deliberately sabotaged President Trump's peace policy, pushing America towards conflict with Russia. She points right at him. "You chose personal gain over the nation's interests. You betrayed the trust of the American people."
What was Graham's final response?
Just a mutter, reportedly. Something like, I just wanted to protect our allies.
That's quite a fall from the initial denials. The sources really paint a picture of a complete collapse of his defense.
Yeah, the description is one of a battlefield. Another Republican senator apparently questioned if the recording was manipulated. Bondi countered with the FBI verification and mentioned witnesses.
Covering all bases.
Another senator accused her of a political circus. Bondi's response, according to the sources, "I'm here to defend the truth, and the truth is Senator Graham acted behind President Trump's back, colluding with those profiting from war."
She really stuck to her guns.
She did. The sources recall her even mentioning Trump's warnings about the deep state, that perceived network of manipulators, and her apparent belief that this whole confrontation was, in a way, a declaration of war against those forces.
Using that term deep state is obviously loaded, but it frames her actions in the context of these sources as part of a larger fight.
Right. So the hearing ends. What happens next? The aftermath, as detailed in the sources, was incredible fast.
Graham resigns.
Days later, yes, news headlines confirm it. His televised statement cited preserving Republican Party unity.
But the sources imply otherwise.
Yeah, the source note says no one believed that was the real reason. Meanwhile, the FBI, under Bondi, expands its probe.
Finds more.
Uncovers an additional $3.5 million. Flowed through offshore accounts, again, some tied to Graham's campaign, all linked to pushing Ukraine aid.
The numbers just keep climbing. What about the oligarch, Kolomoisky?
He becomes the target of an Interpol investigation, according to the sources. A Guardian article apparently detailed how he funneled millions via shell companies to fund political campaigns in the U.S. and Europe. He basically goes underground.
Forced into the shadows. But what about Bondi? This couldn't have gone unanswered.
No way. The backlash was immediate and fierce, the sources say. Republicans denouncing her on TV, accusing her of weaponizing the Department of Justice.
The standard counterattack.
And anonymous articles popped up, spreading rumors she fabricated the recording for Trump. Then it got darker.
How so?
Her office was broken into. Some documents of the Graham case went missing.
A break-in. Seriously.
And a threatening letter sent to her prosecutor, Sarah. The line quoted is chilling. "Stop the investigation or there will be no way back."
Wow. That's direct intimidation. Who would be behind that? The sources must speculate.
They don't name names, but they heavily reference President Trump's earlier warnings to Bondi about stirring up a hornet's nest, about this deep state network internationally and within government who would do anything to protect Graham.
So the implication is powerful forces were pushing back hard? How did Bondi react to the threats and the break-in?
Unwavering, according to the sources. Increased security for her team, ordered the FBI to trace the break-in, and strategically released more of Graham's financial records to fight the rumors. Even when a previously neutral Republican senator apparently pressured her to back off.
Doubling down, essentially.
Seems so. And her mission, as the sources describe it, grew broader than just Graham. She wrote an internal memo outlining a plan to reform the Justice Department, specifically targeting what she called remnants of the deep state Trump often talked about.
Taking the fight beyond one case.
Her DOJ launched what the sources term an unprecedented campaign, auditing defense contracts, scrutinizing foreign aid, tracing these complex financial networks like Kolomoisky's.
A systemic cleanup from her perspective as presented in the sources.
And remember the biolabs, a new FBI report surfaces apparently drafted by Sarah, her prosecutor.
What did it say?
It concluded the biolabs in Ukraine weren't just research projects. They were, quote, tools for certain individuals to profit from geopolitical tensions. This led to an expanded investigation.
So connecting those dots further, the biolabs, Graham's alleged links, the profit motive.
Right. Bondi then held a press conference, stated very publicly, as quoted in the sources, "My mission is to ensure justice isn't distorted by power or money. I pledge that the Justice Department will be a torch illuminating the truth."
A strong public statement of intent.
And that journalist, Clara Weiss, who gave the initial biolab info, she reportedly sent Bondi a message, "Thank you for not backing down," highlighting that collaborative aspect the sources suggest.
It really paints a picture, these sources, of a relentless campaign against entrenched interests facing significant pushback.
Absolutely. So, recapping this deep dive, we've traced the arc from Bondi's initial shocking accusations against Graham in that Senate hearing, through the layers of evidence presented, emails, financial trails, that dossier.
All leading up to that climactic recording, the alleged smoking gun, and then the fallout. Graham's resignation, the expanding investigations, and the intense backlash against Bondi herself.
It really underscores, as the sources present it, the power evidence can have, but also the enormous pressure and danger involved in trying to expose potentially uncomfortable truths about powerful people.
Definitely. It's a complex web.
So the question we leave you with, thinking about this narrative from our sources, what does Bondi's pursuit of accountability, facing political attacks, threats, attempts to discredit her, tell you about the real cost and maybe the reward of demanding transparency when powerful interests are involved?
And how might this story, as laid out in these documents, make you think differently, maybe question assumptions, as you try to stay informed in a world full of complicated narratives? Something to definitely chew on.